Mackenzie has talked about a war for talent for quite a while now. It is on, without a doubt. There's no question about it in my mind. There's about 8 higher end restaurants not far from our house. Every single one of the owners, because they know I'm a prof, have said, students who want to be servers. When I talk to the career services at McGill, there is a huge demand out there for young talent, for undergraduates, for MBAs. It's up from a few years ago. There was some concern coming out of the pandemic, how would things turn out? But it is really a strong demand out there. I have 8 undergrads working for me part-time, so lots of conversations, writing letters of reference, discussing things. Clearly, it's a hot market out there for Generation Z and the younger millennials. So I've got a book, it's with the publisher now, it's called Okay Boomer, Working with Millennials and Generation Z More Effectively. Because it's something which is a bit of a challenge for older people like myself. The boomers, the Generation X, we run the world to a large degree, and that's the way it should be in terms of our experience and all. But what I'm arguing in the book is simply this, in 1 or 2 sentences, that people over 45 with a university degree were taught a modern worldview. People under 35 with a university degree have been taught a postmodern worldview. So they look at the world differently. They've been taught differently. They've experienced it as the internet generation. They really are looking at things considerably differently. Now, the advantage of being older is that I've been around their whole lives. So we can understand them to some degree, but they just don't get us. They don't understand the world we grew up in, the world that we thought about. So a couple of key things in terms of their worldview is there's a tremendous decline in hierarchy. It just doesn't matter in the way it did before. There is a sense that emotions and analysis are more equal. When I was young, analysis was clearly higher than emotions. But what we've seen is now a privileging of emotions over the last 10, 15 years in terms of how we view the world. So what young people feel really matters in a way that we can't just brush to the side. And there's a search for meaning and purpose that they're very much looking for out there. We have a speaker from BCG coming to class on Monday from Bright House as part of BCG that looks at purpose. She runs North America for them. This absolutely resonates with undergrads, the sense that they need to have purpose and meaning. There's a famous bumper sticker when I was young, "He who dies with the most toys wins." And when my students hear that, they're horrified by my generation. It's hard to remember why we believe that, but again, it's part of our history, part of what we were as boomers and some of the older Xers. But the world shifted to where there's a genuine concern about ESG, absolutely a concern about that. There's a concern about equity, diversity, and inclusion. I had a friend who I teach with as a partner at BCG, came to one of my classes. I was out of town, and he had spoken Mandarin to a couple of students. As he begins introducing himself, one of the students puts his hand up and corrects him for assuming that they were Chinese. Now, he didn't realize that my friend had heard them speak Mandarin and spoke Mandarin to them, not saying they weren't Canadians or anything inappropriate, but he was called out. Probably inappropriate. It was inappropriate, but he was called out. Those are young people. They are concerned very much about these issues. Now, will they calm down a bit? Yes, but not much. They're going to be concerned about these issues for, I believe, many, many years to come. So let me just go through a couple of kind of the practical chapter titles of my book to what are some of the practical things we have to do as managing the Zs and younger millennials. Well, the first point I make in the book in terms of a practical point is we need to listen more, talk less. This is a generation where they've seen a decline in hierarchy. They see that multiple people have views of truth. It's not just the people at the top or their bosses that understand truth about today's world. They see they must be listened to, and they want to have input into strategy. So there's 2 big schools of strategy thought in the world, broadly speaking. One is Mintzberg, emergent strategy. Another one's Porter at Harvard, deliberate strategy. The world's moved to more emergent strategy in most contexts, where strategies bubble up from throughout the organization. Everybody's a strategist. Instead of it just coming from the CEO, coming on down, the rest of us salute and say, yes, ma'am. that's what we're going to do. So they see they want to be part of that strategic process. We need to bring them in and listen to them in a way I was not listened to, certainly when I was their age or even into my 30s at times. A second point is they love feedback. And my students want more feedback than they ever wanted before. At a certain point, I say, I'm just making it up now. I'm just not grabbing it out of the air. They love feedback. And there's some reasons for that. They grew up with video games, they grew up with social media, and they grew up with a lot more feedback at school. My wife's a grade 5 teacher. They give more feedback than they did a generation ago. So as managers, as leaders, we've got to give feedback much more to young people. So when I was a manager at IBM years ago, I would think maybe 5% of the time what I'm going to say to Natalie at the end of the meeting after she presents, where today it's more of 15, 20% of my energy is going to go to think about what feedback do I provide to the younger people, particularly. They hunger for it, they want it, and it's great because they're going to improve, they're going to get better. But it's something where they're looking for feedback. Another thing is the importance of emotions at work. And it's something that what I'm arguing with a guy named Kui Wee, who's a prof at INSEAD, he did his PhD at McGill with Mintzberg, is saying we talk about emotional quotient. But these days we have to manage the emotions at the department or organizational level, depending on your area of responsibility. So we think about things like we have to create hope. We're asking for sacrifice today. There's a brighter future. We have to take specific actions to create hope. So it's not just we're for hope, but what actions are you taking? So you're managing the emotions, not only of the person, but of the group, because the emotions matter more than in the past. Two more points then. One is this renewed need for purpose. It's not enough just to make a lot of money. It's not enough just to make a lot of money for the boss and to get the share price up. Like, I'm not sure why when I worked at IBM, I cared about the share price that much. I owned a few shares, but they're much more interested in what's the ESG impact of our organization? What are we doing for equity and diversion and inclusion? What are we doing to help around Black Lives Matters and Indigenous people? These are issues that are very important to them. They will calm down a bit, but I don't think they're going to calm down much. So we've got to actively have the purpose of the business, of the organization, but we're going to have to do these other things as well. What are you doing about climate change is very much on their minds. And again, this sounds a little bit kind of left-wing occasionally, but this is the considerable majority of my students at McGill, and I teach some at HSA as well with the MBA. This is what's on their mind, and we're going to have to respond to it as organizations, which is tough because we have to deliver business results, key performance indicators, and we have to deliver on these agendas as well. It's a more complex world, the one that I worked at. We have to be authentic. They want real people. When I was younger as the corporate person, as an IBMer, I wore a white shirt, a red tie, a blue suit. You could kind of roll me in and roll someone else out, and you probably couldn't tell the difference much. They want authentic people who share, to share their weaknesses, to let people know they're not perfect, they're not sure about the way forward. You want to give them a sense of confidence, but a sense of authenticity. And mentoring. Mentoring is a two-way street where they want to be mentored, but 25% of the time, they should be reverse mentoring you. They should be one giving you feedback on how you can improve, how you can get better. So this is quite a change from the past. I have a couple mentors, well over 70. Doesn't occur to them to ask my advice. But with my students, I have to ask them, how can I improve? With the producer of my radio show, I say to him regularly, how can we make the show better? So just some thoughts that are from my book, but they're also more fundamentally from spending a lot of time working closely with undergraduates, having them work for me. The world's moved on, and to be successful, you have to move on with it.